Seraphine Calloway had learned, a long time ago, how to make herself small. Not small in the way people shrink when they are afraid. Small in the way a person learns to take up less space, so that others have fewer reasons to notice them, fewer reasons to speak about them, and fewer reasons to laugh. She had perfected it over 22 years. She kept her eyes low when elders passed. She finished her work before anyone asked her to. She did not complain when she was given the coldest water to carry, or the heaviest nets to mend. She simply did what was given to her, and went home and did it again the next day. The Iron Veil Pack was not a cruel place exactly. It was an indifferent one, which is often worse. Cruelty at least requires attention. Indifference means you are not worth the effort. Her father had once been the Pack's beta. He had held a seat of honor, eaten at the high table, and walked with his head straight. Then one night, 5 years before Seraphine was even old enough to understand what had happened, a group of rogues had crossed the eastern border. He had been the one stationed there. He had sounded the alarm, but the breach was already inside. 3 wolves were injured. None were killed, but that did not matter in the eyes of the council. What mattered was that the beta's post had been compromised on the beta's watch. He was stripped of rank before the month was over. After that, the family name became something people said quietly and followed with a look. Seraphine had grown up inside that look. The one steady thing in her life was Dale. He was a soldier of mid-rank, broad-shouldered and plain-faced, and he had grown up 3 houses down from her. He was not her lover, and never had been. He was simply someone who had watched her entire life, and decided, without making a ceremony of it, that he would be on her side. When the Pack kitchen deliberately left her rations short, he brought her bread from his own. When an elder assigned her to clean the ceremonial hall alone the night before a celebration, he showed up with a second broom without being asked. He did not talk about it, he just did it. She loved him the way you love a fixed point in an unsteady world. The awakening rite came every year on the night of the autumn full moon. Every wolf between the ages of 18 and 25, who had not yet bonded with their inner wolf, was given one more chance to stand in the sacred circle and call their beast forward. Most shifters awakened at 16. It was rare to go past 18. Going past 20 was considered a sign. Most people used the word hopeless. The kinder ones used the word unlikely. Seraphine was 22. She had stood in the circle 3 times before. Nothing had happened. Not a flicker. Not a warmth. Not the faintest shift in the smoke or the stone. She had walked out each time in silence, and gone home and not spoken about it. The Pack had whispered the word hollow after the 2nd time. By the 3rd time, they had stopped whispering and simply looked at her with something that was not quite pity. She almost did not go to the 4th rite. It was Dale who told her to go, not because he believed something would happen. He was honest enough not to pretend, but he said there was a difference between choosing to stop and simply not showing up, and that she deserved to make the choice herself, rather than let fear make it for her. She thought about that for 2 days. Then she put on her cleanest clothes and walked to the clearing. The crowd was already gathered when she arrived. The air smelled of cedar smoke and cool earth. The elder stood at the center stone with his ceremonial staff, his white robes moving gently in the breeze. Around the edges of the clearing, the Pack had gathered in clusters. Some were there for their own relatives who were stepping into the circle. Most were there because the night was beautiful, and there was nothing else to do. And then there was one person who should not have been there at all. Seraphine felt the shift in the crowd before she saw him, the way people straightened, the way conversations dropped to nothing, the way every head turned slowly toward the far end of the clearing. She turned too. Alpha King Aldrich Voss stood at the edge of the tree line with a small group of guards and 2 advisors. He was tall. That was the first thing she noticed. Not dramatically so, but enough that he stood apart from the men around him. He wore no crown, no ceremonial armor. Just dark clothing, simple in the way that only very expensive things are simple. His face was angular and serious, the kind of face that looked like it had never been surprised by anything. His eyes were a dark gray, and they moved across the clearing slowly, seeing everything and registering almost nothing. He was there for political reasons. She heard the whispers pass through the crowd like a current, a gesture of unity between the Crown and the outer packs. He had been traveling through the southern territories, and Iron Veil was on the route back. It was a courtesy appearance, nothing more. Seraphine looked at him for exactly as long as it took to understand that he was not important to her knight, and then she looked away. She stepped into the circle when her name was called. The crowd went quiet. Not the reverent quiet of people witnessing something sacred, the tight, held breath quiet of people watching something they expected to be embarrassing and were not quite willing to look away from. The elder began the invocation. The cedar smoke shifted directions and curled upward. The stone in the center began to faintly warm, as it did for every candidate. Seraphine stood still. She closed her eyes. She had stopped praying for things years ago, because praying required believing the prayer would be heard, and she had not been sure of that in a long time, so she did not pray. She simply stood and waited, the way she had always waited for things in her life, because waiting was what she knew how to do. 10 seconds. 30. A minute. Nothing. The smoke did not change color. The stone did not brighten. The elder paused his chanting. Someone in the crowd coughed softly, which was worse than anything they could have said. Then she heard it. A low sound, brief, quiet in the way that things are quiet when the person making them is not trying to hide it, because they do not think it matters enough to hide. The Alpha King laughed. Then, to someone near him, in a voice that carried farther than he perhaps intended, he said, "Send her home. The goddess has already made her decision." 24 people heard it. The rest felt the ripple of reaction and turned to those who had heard it to find out what had been said, and the words spread outward through the crowd like ink through water. Seraphine opened her eyes. She did not look at him. She did not look at the crowd. She looked at the center stone for one long moment, and then she turned and walked out of the circle. Her footsteps were steady. Her back was straight. She did not allow anything to show on her face, because she had spent 22 years learning how to keep things from showing, and she was very good at it. She walked past the crowd, past Dale, who reached out and briefly touched her arm as she passed, not saying anything because he understood her well enough to know she did not want words right now. Past the elder, past the last row of onlookers, into the trees. She walked until the noise of the clearing was gone, and the only sound was the wind moving through the branches above her. She had meant to go home. Instead, she found herself at the old ruin. It sat at the far edge of pack territory, a crumbled ring of stone columns that the pack avoided for various reasons they could not quite agree on. Some said it was cursed. Some said it was simply old and unstable. Children were told not to play there. Adults did not visit. Seraphine had been coming here her entire life. She sat down between two fallen columns, in the soft grass that had grown up through the broken stone over many decades. She sat with her knees pulled up and her head down, and for the first time in many years, she let herself feel how tired she was. Not of any one thing, of all of it, all together, at once. She did not cry. She had moved through crying a long time ago and come out somewhere quieter on the other side. She had not prayed in years, but that night, in the silence of the ruin, with the moon above her and no one watching, she tried. She did not ask for power. She did not ask for revenge. She asked for the simplest thing, which was also the hardest. She asked, quietly and without drama, to be seen, once, by something that mattered. The ground beneath her cracked open with light. Not moonlight. This came from below, from the stone itself, from deep within the earth, gold and ancient and warm. It moved up through the columns and across the grass, and it did not hurt her. It simply reached her, and then passed into her, and she felt something inside her chest that had been silent for her entire life take its first slow breath. She did not transform the way other shifters described it. There was no sharp pain, no sudden violence of bone and muscle. She simply became more than she had been, and then she was running. The wolf that ran through the forest that night was something the world had not seen in a very long time. Larger than any wolf living, fur the color of white ash and old gold, eyes that were neither amber, nor silver, nor any of the common shades, but a deep, steady violet that reflected the moonlight like still water. She ran for hours. She did not think about the clearing, or the crowd, or the man who had laughed. She simply ran, and for the first time in 22 years, nothing about her was small. 3 days later, Aldrich Voss returned to Ironvale. He did not come back for her. His royal scholars, when they analyzed the energy reading his trackers had captured from the ruins, had gone very pale and very quiet, and then all spoken at once. What they described to him was not possible. The first-line bloodline had been extinct for 8 centuries. The beast bonded to the original Shifter Queen, the creature from which all royal authority technically derived its oldest claim, did not exist anymore. Textbooks said so. The royal record said so. The crown itself was built in part on the fact that it said so. And yet here was the reading. Here was the violet frequency that appeared in exactly 3 illuminated manuscripts in the royal archive, all of them over 600 years old. He went back expecting to find a rogue noble, perhaps someone with hidden lineage, someone his advisors could negotiate with or quietly manage. He found Seraphine at the river, washing clothes. She did not look up when she heard footsteps. She finished wringing out the shirt in her hands and draped it over a low branch before she turned. She looked at him. He was closer than he had been in the clearing. She could see the exact shade of his eyes now, that serious gray. She could see that he was, at close range, a person and not a symbol, which she had already suspected but now confirmed. He began to speak. He used formal language about bloodlines and legal questions, and the responsibility of the crown to investigate matters of this significance. He spoke for perhaps a full minute, in complete sentences, and with perfect composure. She let him finish. Then she said, "You told me the goddess had already made her decision." She had. You just did not know what it was. She picked up her washing basket and walked inside. What followed was not simple. It was not the kind of story that moves cleanly from one feeling to the next. She was brought to the crown seat for what the council called a legal review. She was given rooms in a wing of the palace that was technically appropriate and practically empty. Aldrich communicated with her through advisors for the first 2 weeks. She read the palace library's collection of first-line histories and found them both fascinating and deeply inaccurate. Life continued, awkwardly, with neither of them quite sure what the other was supposed to be. He came to the library at midnight one night because he could not sleep. She was already there, sitting on the floor with 3 books open around her. She did not hear him come in. He stood in the doorway longer than he meant to. There was something in the way she sat, completely at ease in a palace that was not hers, completely absorbed in something she had decided mattered to her, that stopped him where he stood. He left without speaking. He came back the next night. By the end of the 2nd week they were talking. Carefully at first, then less so. She said things that surprised him. He said things that surprised her. He learned that she was quietly funny, in a way that required you to be paying attention to catch it. She learned that he was lonely, in the vast, echoing way that comes from spending too many years performing authority and not enough years simply being a person. It was not a smooth road. He made a serious error when a report reached him, incomplete and distorted, suggesting she had been secretly negotiating with a powerful noble family to use her bloodline claim for political gain. He confronted her publicly, in front of the full council, with controlled and devastating language. He used the word calculated. He implied she had planned all of this from the beginning. She let him finish. Then she said, "You laughed at me in a clearing. You put me in an empty wing of your palace. You spoke to me through other people for 2 weeks. And now you are doing this in front of all of them. Again." She paused. "I declined that lord's offer the moment he made it. You did not ask me that before you started speaking." She walked out. He verified the full account within an hour. He did not sleep that night. The next morning, he opened the council session by stating clearly and without softening that he had received incomplete information and acted on it incorrectly, that his accusation had been wrong, and that the record should reflect that error as his own. He did not explain himself at length. He did not invite sympathy. He simply corrected what he had broken and sat down. Then he looked across the chamber at her and said that he owed her a private apology, and that he intended to make one, and that it was not council business. She gave him the conversation. It was the first one in which neither of them was being careful. He tried to tell her about the clearing. He stopped twice before he managed it. He said that he had spent a great many years finding it easier to dismiss things than to sit with them, that it was a habit he had built without noticing, the way all bad habits are built, that he was aware it did not excuse anything, but that she deserved to know it was not about her. It had never been about her. She listened to all of it, Then she said, "Your wolf bowed to mine. At the river, when you first came back, I felt it happen." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes." The council ruled that the ancient law was valid, but that the shared crown it referenced could not be forced. It required consent from both sides. Seraphine held the right. She did not have to take it. She did not take it that day. What she asked for instead was simpler, and in its own way more important. She asked for her bloodline to be formally entered into the royal record. She asked for the right to speak in council on behalf of the outer packs and those without rank. She asked for her father's honor to be restored in the official history of Ironvale. Every request was granted. Aldrich went with her to Ironvale for the recognition ceremony. He went without ceremony of his own, no formal announcement, no entourage beyond 2 quiet guards. He stood at the back of the crowd, which had gathered the way crowds always gather when they sense that something real is about to happen. Seraphine stepped into the circle. The elder began the invocation. The smoke rose. The stone warmed. This time, the smoke turned violet. No one laughed. 6 months later, she found a document on the table beside her in the library, set there so quietly she had not heard him come in. She read it twice. It was a formal proposal for the co-regency, but the language was not political. It did not cite law or lineage or ancient obligation. At the bottom, in handwriting that was more careful than his usual signature, he had written one line. "Because I would like to be someone who sees you correctly, if you will let me try." Seraphine read it a 3rd time. Then she picked up her pen and signed it. She did not say anything. She set the pen down and went back to her book. But she was smiling, and she did not stop for a long time.